The story begins in 1865. The Civil War in America was nearing its end. At that moment, we see a captain holding a gold coin in his hand. He was loading several crates filled with gold onto a ship. On top of those crates was written CSA. Suddenly, they came under attack. But the captain quickly launched the ship into the water and shut down all the engines. So in the darkness, no one could detect its location. And that's exactly what happened. They managed to escape their enemies. Now the story shifts to the present day, where Dr. Sophia is sitting inside a WHO vehicle. Now the scene shifts to Las Vegas City, in Africa. Suddenly, a strange disease has started spreading rapidly there. After examining a new patient, it was discovered that he too was infected with the same illness, something completely unknown so far. The patient's mother revealed that a few days earlier, he had traveled with his father to Mali, and soon after returning, he fell ill. Sophia placed the patient in the car and contacted her senior. She said, "If we count him, that makes 6 infected in total. We should send these files to the WHO immediately." But her senior disagreed, saying that with so few cases, no one would take them seriously. Sophia now wanted to travel to Mali herself to find out what exactly was causing this disease to spread. But at that time, Mali was in the middle of a civil conflict, and her senior warned her, "In this situation, no one will allow you to enter that country." Meanwhile, a masked man was watching them from a distance. It seemed he didn't like the presence of these doctors. Suddenly, Sophia remembered. They also needed a sample from the patient's father. She then headed toward the lighthouse, where he worked. When she arrived, she found him in the same condition as his son, or worse, because he was already dead. Quietly, Sophia collected the sample and stepped outside. At that moment, someone was bottling water in the sea nearby. But then, the masked man, who had been watching the doctors from afar, suddenly launched an attack on Sophia. But this boat? The man who had been working on the boat rushed in just in time and saved Sophia. But in the middle of the scuffle, the masked man managed to grab Sophia's bag and escape. When Sophia regained consciousness, she found herself on a ship called Noma, a treasure-hunting vessel sailing in the open sea. Outside, she saw the same man who had saved her life. He was carrying an expensive statue he had just retrieved from the ocean. In fact, these people were searching for the CSA ship, but to this day, no trace of it had been found. Just then, Almora, the owner of the vessel, appeared. The man who had saved Sophia was introduced as Doug. Almora told Doug that the treasure they had recovered must be showcased at tonight's museum party, so they quickly cleaned it up. After that, Doug went to speak with a Nigerian dealer. At the RD event, the priceless statue was displayed in front of everyone. In reality, it was the treasure of an African king worth billions. Doug hurried over to the dealer, who then showed him a coin with the letters CSA engraved on it. Doug immediately took the coin and said, "This has been my dream for so many years." Until now, no one ever knew where that ship had disappeared. At the party, the owner of the Mascort Company was also present. He was the one who had invested money in the treasure hunt. This man was quite influential in Mali, so Sophia asked him for help in getting there. The company owner warned her that traveling there was extremely dangerous, but if she was determined, he would try to find a way. A little later, Doug also arrived and showed James the CSA coin. He further explained that the coin had been found with someone living in Mali, and Doug was convinced that the wreck of that ship must also be hidden somewhere in Mali. James was thrilled when he heard this, and he gave Doug and Almora permission to go to Mali for 3 days. Their mission was to search for the ship, and if they found even the smallest clue, then a full-scale expedition to recover the ship would be launched. The next day, when they arrived at the harbor, Sophia and Dr. Jack were already waiting there. Sophia told Doug that James had said, "Dr. Jack and I will also join you on your trip to Mali." So, the 5 of them set off for Mali. That night, while they were having dinner, Doug told Sophia about the coin and revealed that finding this ship had always been his personal dream. As soon as they reached Mali, Sophia and Jack went their own way, while Doug and the others headed to the house of the man who had once possessed the coin. But when they arrived, they learned that the man had already died. Once again, the path to discovering the ship seemed to be blocked. Just then, Doug spotted a mosque. The 3 of them went inside and met a man there. Often, such religious places kept old records. At Doug's request, the man searched through the ancient documents. That's when they discovered that many years ago, a ship had arrived at that very port, but there had been no survivors on board. The river's current had been so strong that the ship drifted further downstream. This information turned out to be very useful for Doug. He immediately went to James and told him everything. Without wasting any time, they set off toward the city of Java, which was a bit farther from there. On the way, they discovered something stuck to part of their boat. After a quick test, they realized it was a special type of soil, possibly rust. But Doug pointed out that finding this kind of soil in flowing water was highly unusual. It was definitely something to be concerned about. Just then, a military boat suddenly approached them. The officer on board kept repeating one question over and over. "Where is the doctor who was with you?" The king of the region had already learned that 2 foreign doctors had entered his country, trying to uncover the real cause behind the spreading disease. The king ordered that they must be stopped as quickly as possible, or else a great danger might follow. Doug immediately realized that something was definitely wrong. Otherwise, why would there be so much trouble over these doctors? Doug replied, "Sir, we don't speak much English. Let us pull our boat closer so we can talk." Then Doug tossed them a rope, which the officers tied to their own boat. The next moment, Doug signaled his friends, "Full speed!" With one sudden burst, their boat jerked forward, flipping the officers' boat upside down. Doug quickly cut the rope, and they managed to escape. But the danger wasn't over yet. Just a short distance ahead, 2 more boats were already waiting for them, and the moment they were spotted, gunfire erupted. Doug knew instantly, "We'll have to jump from the boat, otherwise there's no telling if we'll survive this." Before jumping, they cut into the fuel tank to cause a massive explosion. When the other boat approached, the 3 of them jumped into the water. The officers opened fire at their boat, and the leak triggered a catastrophic explosion, killing all the policemen. Soon after, the 3 of them emerged from the river and reached a house on the shore. Rudy asked Doug, "Now that we don't have a boat, should we give up searching for the ship?" Doug replied, "We can look for the ship later. First, we need to save the doctor. If they get caught, they'll be killed." Doug then told Rudy, "You cross the border quickly and go to Almora." He himself set out with James to find the 2 doctors. Meanwhile, the 2 doctors reached a village, but no one was in sight. They searched everywhere, but all they found was silence. Sophia discovered a room full of dead bodies, all of whom had died from the same disease. The next morning, the 2 doctors worked together to bury all the bodies. At the same time, Rudy successfully crossed the border in secret. In the village, Sophia found a well and thought that maybe something could be found inside it. She prepared to descend. While collecting water samples from the well, Jack suddenly reported, "Some soldiers have arrived above." Moments later, gunfire rang out. The soldiers killed everyone except Jack. Terrified, Sophia hid inside the well. Just then, a helicopter landed nearby, and the king of Mali, Kazim, arrived at the scene. Kazim asked Jack, "Where is that lady doctor?" Hearing the helicopter, Doug and James realized that the doctors were nearby. But Kazim was furious. He shot Dr. Jack dead and ordered his men to find Sophia as quickly as possible. Doug and James hid nearby, watching everything unfold. Kazim's men began killing everyone around them. At one point, Doug's own life was in danger, but Sophia came from behind and killed one of Kazim's men, saving him. Sophia was deeply shaken by the death of her senior, Dr. Jack, but Doug said, "We need to get out of here as fast as possible. This place is far from safe." The 3 of them then escaped Kazim's military zone and reached another location. But this new place was even more dangerous. Suddenly, a group of horsemen arrived, captured all 3 of them, and took them to their king, Gordico. Gordico asked, "What have you come here to do?" Sophia replied, "I'm a doctor. I'm investigating a disease that has spread here." Hearing the name of the disease, Gordico had her taken to a room where countless people had died from the same illness. Sophia examined them and confirmed that yes, their deaths were caused by the same disease. She said, "This is exactly why I came here." After some thought, Gordico allowed them to stay in the city. Sophia then tested the local water and discovered that it had been poisoned. It was impossible for it to have happened naturally. Someone had deliberately contaminated the water. She informed the king, saying, "We need to find out where this poison is coming from." The king agreed. "Find it as quickly as you can. I'll provide all the help you need." Meanwhile, James was playing football with local children. When the ball rolled a bit farther, he went after it and reached a strange place. There, he noticed some unusual paintings. Amazingly, the paintings contained references to the ship they had been searching for. It was revealed that the ship was buried beneath a dry desert in the area. Sophia and Doug arrived to see it as well. Doug said, "About 200 years ago, there was a river here, but now it's dried up." The three of them began preparing to search for the river. While planning their search, they noticed a fortress in the paintings as well, suggesting that a castle had once stood near the river. Doug speculated that perhaps the poisoned water in the village was coming from that river. The river hadn't fully dried up. Some of its water was still flowing underground. Now, the three of them set out on their journey toward the river. Following the path where the river had flowed 200 years ago, they soon spotted the fortress. From atop the fortress, they saw a solar plant belonging to the Muscat Company. But it made no sense to have a solar plant in such a remote location. Doug also noticed a train a short distance away. They carefully approached the train and, with some cleverness, managed to sneak inside. Meanwhile, Rudy had reached Almora. Rudy was wearing the same red soil sample he had taken on his boat when he went to Mali. When he tested the sample and showed the results to Almora, Almora was shocked. Sophia, James, and Doug entered the plant. Inside, they realized that the facility was producing a radioactive chemical which would be rapidly generated due to the intense sunlight in the area. Sophia's attention was drawn to some containers being moved underground. The three of them followed the person carrying them. When the basement door was opened, they were astonished. In the basement, thousands of tons of radioactive and toxic chemicals had been stored for years. Some containers were leaking, and the chemicals were seeping into the Nirja River underground, which supplied water to the entire country of Mali. This explained why the disease was spreading so quickly. Meanwhile, Almora and Rudy took the report to the U.S. Embassy. The American officials couldn't believe such a thing was possible. At that moment, James and his friends were escaping from the plant, but the Muscat Company's men caught them. The Muscat representatives asked Sophia, "What are you doing here? And how did you learn about this place?" Sophia told Mr. Muscat, "Whatever you are doing in this plant is killing people." Mr. Muscat replied to James, "We're doing nothing. We're just burning some toxic chemicals." Sophia explained, "The chemicals you stored in the basement are seeping into the river. People are drinking this water and getting sick." Hearing this, Mr. Muscat was terrified. Maybe she was right. Then they tried to take Doug and James somewhere, tying them up. Doug cleverly used the gold coin to unlock the back door of the truck, and they managed to separate themselves from the truck. Mr. Muscat quickly met with Kazim and told him what Sophia had said. Kazim replied, "If she's concerned, shut down the plant, but I'll still pay her monthly salary. I don't care much about people dying." Doug and James were now wandering lost in the desert. Their hands were still tied with the truck's ropes. They walked for a long distance and eventually became exhausted. Suddenly, halfway through, they discovered a crashed airplane. Its landing gear was still intact. Somehow, they glided the plane over the sand, climbed aboard, and reached a nearby village. There, they found a telephone and called Almora, telling him the entire story. Doug sold the gold coin and bought a jeep. With this jeep, Doug and James sought help from Horsepale and his men, planning to work together to take action against Kazim. However, Gordigo didn't have enough men, nor did he possess large weapons like Kazim, so he refused to fight. Still, he gave them the car he had bought from Kazim. Using this car, James and Doug headed toward the plant, but right at the gate, they were stopped. They forced their way inside with guns. That's when Muscat realized someone had entered and quickly moved to the upper level. When Doug and James entered, they were astonished. The entire plant was empty. James said, "Most likely, Muscat realized that people are dying because of him, and perhaps even America knows about it. That's why he's trying to erase all notices and evidence in the plant." James quickly went downstairs to locate the explosives that they might use to destroy the plant. Just then, a helicopter appeared. Muscat forcefully put Sophia onto the helicopter. As they took off, Doug arrived. Doug was about to confront Muscat, but at that moment, one of Muscat's men came from behind and caught Doug. However, Sophia jumped off the helicopter just in time. On the ground, James found a bomb inside a container and carefully placed it in his backpack. Meanwhile, Muscat, from the helicopter, used his control system to turn the solar plant toward the sun. All the solar panels began working at full speed. Thanks to James's skill, no explosion occurred, because he had disconnected the bomb. Seeing this, Muscat became extremely angry. Sophia and Doug freed themselves from Muscat's men, and then the three of them got into a car and drove away, knowing they needed to get far from there. At that moment, Kazim's helicopter began chasing them, opening fire. Doug told James, "Start dropping the explosives you found in the basement outside." As James did so, every time a bomb landed, it exploded. The smoke and dust were so thick that Kazim had to maneuver his helicopter to avoid it. But this explosion caused something they never expected. The sand at that spot began to shift, and the ship, which had been buried for years, rose to the surface. Seeing the ship, the three of them quickly hid inside, but Kazim realized what was happening and started firing at the ship again. Many of Kazim's men arrived and surrounded them. The attack on the ship caused the containers inside to open, and gold coins began to spill out. Doug couldn't believe his eyes. These coins were still intact after all these years. Right then, they found an old cannon inside the ship, still in excellent condition. They prepared to use it. When Kazim's helicopter came into view, they fired the cannon. The helicopter was hit with a massive explosion, and Kazim was killed. After that, all of Kazim's soldiers surrendered. The three of them stepped outside, astonished. Why had such a large military force surrendered before them? But just then, they looked behind and saw that Muscat's men had surrounded them on all sides. Meanwhile, in America, an undercover agent who knew about all these events secretly poisoned Muscat's drink, the same poison he had been giving to the people of Mali. Soon, Muscat would face the same fate he had inflicted on others.